78 bodies, piled into shallow graves, erased from history as if they never existed. Families buried without names, children hidden beneath the soil, their deaths never recorded. For over a century, Blackwood's earth kept its silence, until the day the ground was disturbed, and the truth clawed its way back into the light. Before we uncover this terrifying secret, make sure you subscribe to Mystery Diary and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story history tried to bury. And tell us in the comments, which city or country are you watching from? We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers. Blackwood Hill was never a place that welcomed strangers. Tucked deep into the forests of New England, it looked ordinary from a distance. Wooden houses with slanted roofs, a crooked church steeple rising above the trees, and fields that once promised good harvests. But anyone who stayed longer than a few hours would notice the silence. No laughter of children in the yards, no bells ringing from the church, not even the sound of music during festivals. The air carried a weight, as if the town itself was holding back a secret. Old travelers' journals described the same feeling. One man passing through in 1874 wrote, "The people keep their heads down, and they lock their doors before sunset. Something in their eyes tells me they fear more than thieves or wild animals." Locals were polite but never spoke freely. Ask too many questions, and they would turn away, muttering warnings under their breath. Don't dig too deep in Blackwood's soil. It remembers. Strange events had already left scars on the land. Fires had consumed entire farmhouses without clear cause. Families were known to vanish between one season and the next, leaving meals unfinished on their tables. Cattle sometimes turned up mutilated in the fields, as though torn apart by something that no farmer dared to name. And the church bell, the one built to call villagers together, had not rung in decades. No one seemed willing to explain why. To outsiders, Blackwood was just another fading settlement, a relic of the 1800s. But those who lived there knew the truth. Something had poisoned the soil long before the first graves were uncovered. It was a town that survived in whispers, built on fear, waiting for the day when its darkest secret would rise again. It was the summer of 1952 when Blackwood's silence was finally broken. A small crew of workers had been sent to clear land near the old churchyard, planning to build a new road that would connect the town to a nearby highway. At first, it was nothing unusual. Cutting trees, digging through soil, laying down stones. But within days, the men began hitting something their shovels couldn't explain. At first, they thought it was wood, old roots buried deep. But when one of the men lifted the broken pieces, he froze. It wasn't wood. It was a rotted coffin plank. Its nails rusted, the edges splintered. Beneath it lay bones, tangled together in a way that made no sense. Not one body, not two, dozens. Word spread fast. People from the town gathered at the site, standing in silence as the workers uncovered grave after grave. Some coffins had collapsed long ago, spilling their contents into the soil. In one shallow pit, 3 children lay side by side, their small skulls turned toward each other as if they had been placed that way deliberately. In another, a woman's skeleton was discovered with broken wrists, the bones bent in ways that suggested she had not been dead when the earth covered her. By the end of the week, 78 bodies had been unearthed. None carried a name. No headstones, no church records, no mention in the town's history. It was as if these people had never lived at all. Officials who came to investigate wrote quick reports but soon went silent, insisting the remains were from an epidemic burial and urging workers to move on. But the people of Blackwood knew better. Whispers began to rise again. Why had these families been hidden? And who had the power to erase so many lives without leaving a single trace? The discovery of the graves should have been the beginning of answers, but it only led to deeper questions. Curious researchers tried to match the bones with old records. They opened the church archives, sifted through the town's census lists, and searched for family names that might explain who had been buried. But page after page was missing. Whole years were gone, as if someone had carefully cut them out with a knife. In the county courthouse, one clerk whispered about a strange order given long ago. He said an unknown official had demanded that every mention of certain families be destroyed. Their birth certificates, their marriage records, even property deeds were removed. The clerk only remembered a few names, passed down in secret: the Crowleys, the Miltons, the Blackwoods themselves. Families that once lived in town, yet officially had never existed. It was not only documents that had vanished. Old letters, photographs, even grave markers had been taken away. Locals told hushed stories of nights when men dressed in black cloaks walked through the cemetery, prying open tombs and carrying away headstones under moonlight. By dawn, nothing remained but flat earth, as if those people had never been buried there at all. The strangest part was how quickly memories faded. Children grew up without hearing the names of their grandparents. Entire bloodlines were spoken of only in whispers, and even then, never aloud after dark. It was as if an invisible hand had pressed against the town, silencing both paper and tongue. And so the graves lay hidden, their stories erased, until the accident in 1952 pulled them back into the light. But why had someone gone to such effort to wipe out these families? Were they victims of disease, or of something far more deliberate? The official explanation was simple: a plague. The kind that swept through towns in the 1800s, stealing lives overnight. That was the story written in county files after the graves were uncovered. Quick, clean, and convenient. But people who had lived in Blackwood, and those whose grandparents had been there, told something very different. According to them, the sickness in 1849 was unlike any illness they had ever known. Came suddenly, without warning. Strong men were struck down in a single night. Children wasted away not over weeks, but within hours. Neighbors described faces turning gray, eyes sinking into darkness, as if the life had been pulled out of them rather than fading naturally. Old diaries that survived gave chilling details. One entry spoke of hearing footsteps outside long after the house was locked, followed by faint knocking at the windows. Another described loved ones buried too quickly, only for villagers to whisper that they had seen the dead walking along the road days later. Fear spread faster than the supposed plague itself. Families began refusing to help their neighbors. Farmers would not share their harvests, afraid that even touching another man's crops would invite death. And when a child cried out in the night, few dared to come running. Stranger still was the way the sickness ended. It did not burn itself out slowly. One week, the town seemed doomed. The next, it was as though the darkness had simply vanished. No doctors explained it, no priest claimed to have cured it. It was as if something had taken what it wanted, and then left. Whether it was truly disease or something far older and more unnatural, no one could say. But the graves, and the silence that followed, told their own story. As researchers dug deeper, they realized the graves did not look like ordinary burials. The bodies had not been laid to rest with care. Some were stacked together, twisted at odd angles, as if they had been thrown in haste. Others showed marks on their bones, not the signs of disease but of violence. Broken ribs, fractured skulls, wrists bound so tightly the bones carried grooves that rope alone could not have made. The most disturbing finds were the symbols. On several coffins, faint carvings had survived the rot of time. Circles, crosses with strange hooks, and crude shapes of animals no one could identify. A few bones even carried etchings, cut deep into the surface, as though someone had tried to mark the dead themselves. Whispers soon grew darker. Was Blackwood really struck by plague? Or had its people been sacrificed? An old priest's journal suggested that some families were accused of bringing a curse to the land, and that the only way to purge the evil was to destroy them completely. Not just their lives, but their names, their history, their memory. One entry, written in shaky Latin, spoke of a night of binding, when the townsfolk gathered in secret and carried out punishments no law would allow. If the journal was true, men, women, and even children were taken one by one, their bodies offered not to God, but to something else, something the priest dared not name directly. Locals said the earth itself seemed to reject those graves. Animals refused to graze near the churchyard. Dogs howled and pulled away from the soil. And even decades later, the grass above the burial pits grew in twisted, sickly patches, as though the land remembered what had been done. It no longer seemed like a story of disease. It was something far more deliberate, a cleansing or a curse. After the bodies were uncovered, Blackwood should have demanded answers. But instead, the town grew quiet, almost as if the people had been waiting for this moment, and were terrified it had finally come. Families who had lived there for generations refused to speak about the graves. When journalists came asking questions, doors were shut in their faces. Some townsfolk even denied the discovery at all, claiming nothing unusual had been found, though the bones were still being carted away under their very streets. It was as if silence itself had become part of Blackwood's survival. But silence could not stop the fear. Strange things began happening soon after the graves were disturbed. Lights flickered in houses near the churchyard. Children woke screaming in the night, saying they saw pale figures standing by their windows. Farmers swore their animals grew restless at dusk, refusing to enter their barns unless dragged inside. One worker who had been part of the road project left town within weeks. Before he vanished, he told a friend he was plagued by dreams of hands reaching out from the dirt, grabbing at his ankles, pulling him back toward the burial pit. He said he often woke to find dirt under his fingernails, though his bed was clean. Even the church tried to stay silent. The pastor preached sermons about forgiving the sins of the past, but never once spoke of the graves directly. Yet, his sudden illness only deepened suspicions. Some whispered he knew too much. Others claimed he was being punished for secrets the church had kept buried. By the end of that year, the road project was abandoned. Blackwood remained as it had always been, isolated, uneasy, and haunted by the things beneath its soil. Today, the graves of Blackwood are marked only by a few crooked stones, half sunken into the earth. No names, no dates, nothing to honor the dead who were erased from history. Travelers who passed through barely noticed the ground where nearly 80 souls were buried. But those who stop, those who linger, speak of an atmosphere heavy enough to press on the chest, as if the earth itself remembers. Locals still refuse to discuss it. Some say silence is the only thing keeping the curse contained. Others believe the truth has already leaked into the soil, seeping into every house, every street, every bloodline that remains. And in their silence, the story festers, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to speak it aloud. Researchers who studied the site came away unsettled. One archaeologist admitted that for every bone identified, it felt as if another lay hidden just beyond reach. He left his notes unfinished, scrawling only a single line before abandoning the project forever. Some histories were buried for a reason. The unanswered questions remain. Were those 80 people victims of a plague, or were they sacrificed in a ritual meant to erase them? Why were their names stripped from every record, their existence wiped clean? And most unsettling of all, if the curse of Blackwood demanded silence, what happens when silence is finally broken? The wind that moves through the abandoned graveyard carries no answers. Only the faint sound of leaves brushing across forgotten earth, like whispers that no one can quite make out. Perhaps they are calling for justice, or perhaps they are warning us to look away. But one truth cannot be denied. The dead of Blackwood were never meant to rest in peace.